Is This a Great Game or What? With the Hall of Famer Tim Kurkjian. I'm his son, Jeff Kurkjian, dad. And earlier this week, it was Lou Gehrig Day across Major League Baseball. And today, we're going to take some time to honor your brother, my Uncle Matt, who passed away in 2023 from this terrible disease. And your brother, your other brother, my Uncle Andy, the oldest of the three Kurkjian boys, is going to be joining to do that in just a few moments. But Dad, obviously, we have now been immersed very closely into this ALS community, and it's a community that nobody wants to be a part of, but it's a beautiful one to be a part of because the people are so amazing and so strong and absolutely beautiful.
Right. And Teresa Thurtle, who I got to know through all of this, once told me she lost 2 family members to ALS. She said, this is the worst disease ever, and it has the greatest support system ever. Because everyone who's had any connection to this understands. And last year, Jeff, in Philadelphia, we talked to the Piscotti family and Jim Poole, former Major League pitcher who we lost, and Aaron Nola's uncle was lost, and Sam Hilliard's father was lost to ALS, and Will Hardy, the Utah Jazz basketball coach, lost someone to ALS. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that we are here trying to raise awareness to find a cure for this disease. And we have Sarah Langs, who is battling this disease, and she's so courageous. It's unbelievable as she works her way through it. And Michael Brown, who I met in Philadelphia last year, wonderful guy, high school baseball coach. He's fighting it also. And Jeff, all those people who are fighting for them, Boog Shambi, who does so much with Project Main Street to fight and to raise money for those afflicted. That's what this is all about, even though today mostly is going to be about our fallen brother, Matt.
Take some time to learn more, have some laughs, maybe a tear. Go do your research, support a cause like ALS because it's the Kurkjian family cause now for the rest of our lives. We'll be fighting to find a cure. So let's introduce and let's bring in my dad's oldest brother, Andy Kurkjian. Hi, Uncle Andy. How are you?
I'm doing great, Jeff. Thanks.
Jeff, as you know, Uncle Andy is a Hall of Famer also at Catholic University for baseball. He's the most modest man in the world. This is the last time we'll talk about his baseball prowess, but people need to know on a baseball podcast, we have one of the greatest players in the history of Catholic University baseball on today's podcast.
And
naturally.
Right. And of course, our late brother, Matt, and that's what this podcast is all about. He's in the Baseball Hall of Fame at Catholic University also. So, Jeff, when I was growing up, when I was an adult, we had, who's the only Kurkjian brother who wasn't good enough to play college baseball? Answer, Tim. And then it became, who's the only Kurkjian brother who isn't in the Hall of Fame? Brother Tim. This is after Andy and Matt just dwarfed me when it came to athletic baseball ability.
Sounds like you didn't have a chip on your shoulder at all, Dad. So the reason why we bring in my Uncle Andy, my dad's oldest brother, is because this past Monday across Major League Baseball was Lou Gehrig Day, remembering Lou Gehrig, his life, his legacy, and ultimately his battle with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And the unfortunate truth in the Kurkjian family, in our baseball family, is we have been touched by a diagnosis and a loss from ALS with my Uncle Matt, the middle brother of these 2 amazing men in front of me. And it's an honor, Uncle Andy, for you to join our podcast, to do this, to talk about your brother, to talk about this family, to talk about the upbringing in this baseball home led by your dad, the first Jeff Kurkjian. I think this is going to be such a great picture and image for our listeners to kind of understand how this love of the game started for all 3 of these boys.
Right. And Jeff, we're all wearing our number 2 Matt Kurkjian jerseys that were handed out. I'll tell the story later. And let me just show you the number 2.
Right on the back, M. Kurkjian.
Right. And it's really interesting. We'll get to this later also, but they named an award at Catholic University called the Matt Kurkjian Ultimate Teammate Award. Andy has been there for the celebration of that. I went this year, and this was so cool. Justin McCarthy won the Matt Kurkjian Ultimate Teammate Award. He grew up as a huge fan of Derek Jeter, and he wore number 2. Justin did this year at Catholic University, which is the number that Uncle Matt wore for his 4-year career there. How cool is that?
That's awesome. Now, Dad, let's ask Uncle Andy here, because this award was named after Uncle Matt because of just that. He is the ultimate teammate. And your senior year at Catholic U, Andy, your brother joins you as a member of the team and later, becomes a Hall of Famer along with you. What was that like when you're a senior? You're the big starting catcher, the big guy on campus, and your little brother comes to the same school as you do and is now on your same team.
Well, that was really cool. Okay, so it was also, turns out to be 50 years ago, was 1975 was my senior year, and Matt was a freshman and I was a senior. Now, you remember when you're 3 years apart like that, when he was in high school, I was in college. So I didn't see him play in high school. And when I was in high school, he was in middle school. And when he was in his last 3 years of college, I had left town. I didn't watch his last 3 years. So really the only overlap we had was that freshman year. And it was, I don't know how bad my memory is, but what I remember...
It's pretty bad, Andy, by the way.
What I remember is actually being surprised that he must have had a great high school career because he made the team. And I remember looking at him as a freshman, and he weighed maybe 135 pounds. And I'm thinking, oh my God, he's a little guy. He wasn't that short, but he was lean.
Right. And Andy, I don't want to interrupt here, but my wife, Emily, when she met you for the very first time, she had already met Uncle Matt. She clearly, obviously, had already met my dad and kind of looked at me and said, "Are you sure that your Uncle Andy is not the mailman's kid?" Because Andy, at your peak, you were 6 feet even, 6'1"?
No, 6 feet.
No, I was very close to 6 feet, I would say, and I weighed like 175 in college. And
then there's Uncle Matt. How you said 130 at like 5'6" and a half, 5'7"?
Yeah, but and it's a big but. Matt turned out to be a better athlete than me. He could run faster than me. In fact, I really thought I was fast. And I remember it was after college sometime, and I was maybe bragging, I forget, but I challenged him to a 100-yard dash. And I said, I can blow your doors off. So we do this 100-yard dash, and he starts out running with me. And like 50 yards in, he kind of looks at me and he goes, I'll see you later. And he just blew past me. And I thought I was quick. So he was really fast.
Andy, you were fast. Matt was faster. Matt
He
played
was faster.
Of course he was. He played in the Industrial League, which was the league that Uncle Andy played in, Jeff, and it's where all the college players played during the summer. Matt stole home 5 times in one summer. And this is a straight steal of the plate, not a double steal where they throw down to get the guy going to second and then Matt runs home. 5 straight steals of the plate in one summer. And the other thing about him, Andy's right. Matt weighed 135 pounds in college, but we all know his greatest strength, quite literally, were in his hands and his wrists. And Jeff, I'll never forget this. Andy will forget this, of course. We had an arm wrestling contest. This is about 20 years ago. We had an arm wrestling contest among the Kurkjian boys. It was me, Andy, Uncle Matt, and Andy's son, Christopher, who was a gymnast who could do an iron cross and was built like a tank. Okay. So I'm the last person in, and Matt pinned me in less than 2 seconds. I'm not kidding. It was like this. It's over. Because I have big hands, but I have weak hands. So Matt crushed me. And then he beat Christopher, who was 30 years younger than him, in phenomenal athletic shape. And Christopher, Andy, do you remember, was absolutely astonished that Uncle Matt could beat him in arm wrestling.
Yeah, Matt surprised, he exceeded expectations in every way. For example, his arm. I thought I had a good arm, and I did. I had a really good arm as a catcher and everything. Matt played third base. He had every bit a good arm as I had. He could really play the game. He was known for that. He's also very hard-nosed player, sort of a Pete Rose kind of player. He would play the game hard, like Tim said. He'd steal home and stuff. I don't remember that in college, but he would get hurt. I think he broke his collarbone doing that. He broke other bones doing that. He played really, really hard. And I always respected how hard he played the game.
Jeff, he had a major league throwing arm at 135 pounds. So did Andy, by the way, as a catcher who had a better arm than Matt, which is really, really saying something. So the other thing about Matt, and I'll get to throwing again in a minute, is what a great ringleader he was for our entire family, what a leader of men that he was in everything that he did. So he was a really good high school baseball coach. And he had to quit after a couple years because as a math teacher, baseball coach, sadly, he couldn't make enough money to support his family. So he went and got his second degree, an IT degree. But when he was the coach of the summer league teams, and Andy remembers this, he would take the kids who frankly weren't good enough to play on the high school team or on some sort of elite travel team, and he gave them a place to play, including his son, Michael. So they're not a very good team. They lost almost every game, but they added a kid to the team named Justin, and Justin could really play, but he didn't have anywhere to play that summer, so he joined Uncle Matt's team. So Uncle Matt is throwing BP to Justin one day, and Justin says, I want you to throw harder. This is Justin, who's a high school kid. I want you to throw harder. And Uncle Matt says, no, that's not what we're doing here. I'm trying to throw the speed that you'll be facing. This is not a competition, all that. Finally, Justin starts yelling at him, I want you to throw as hard as you can. So Matt said, I'm not going to do it. And then Matt, ultimately one of the great closet competitors ever, decides I'm going to let it go here. And he strikes Justin out on 3 pitches without a chance of getting a hit. But he needed to be pushed before he was going to show up a high school kid. So then Justin says, all right, now I'm going to pitch to you. So Justin, who was the best pitcher on the team, gets on the mound. This is still in batting practice and Matt hit the first pitch over the hill in left field. That's our brother Matt, never once boasting about anything he can do and only getting into a competition, especially with someone younger, until he was pushed. And then he said, get out of my way. I'm going to crush you here.
A couple months ago, Dad, we got an email to our podcast from a guy named Brady. And Brady used to play for Uncle Matt's team, the same team you're talking about. And he said, I'm so happy to listen to your guys' podcast. He said, I had read the article that, Dad, you had penned about Uncle Matt when he was first diagnosed. And he said, last year, I started coaching my own son's 6U team. I hope I have the same level of patience and kindness that Coach Kurkjian showed me as a young kid. So they just emailed this because they started listening to the podcast. And I thought it was so special for him, one, to take the time to reach out to us and let us know that note, Dad. But it just goes to show, you're right, super competitive, an ultimate athlete, but also kind and patient and all of the things that you need in a coach. He was the perfect balance of those two things.
Right. Andy, that's Matt, don't you think? Kind, patient in every way.
Yeah, he never boasted, never bragged, but he led by example. Particularly his leadership in Catholic U and every team he's ever been on was exemplary. And I always remember he was a really tough out. I mean, he would get in the batter's box and he didn't instill fear in anybody, but if you threw a ball, he didn't swing. I mean, it was really tough to get him out. And I think he must have walked a lot because he had a better eye than the umpire, and he would just stand there. And if it was a ball, he was not going to swing.
Right. And you know what he used to do, Jeff? And Andy probably remembers this, but Uncle Matt, when it's his turn coming up, he would go right up next to home plate and watch the pitcher's stuff from there, right? Which you're not allowed to do. You're supposed to stay in the on-deck circle, but he would always get closer to get a better look. And the pitchers at Howard, Andy remembers how competitive the pitchers at Howard University, they threw it, Matt, a couple of times before he even got to the plate. They threw it at him to say, you're not allowed to come this close to the plate.
Yeah.
We're going to throw at you. And they threw at him once. And Chuck Hinton, who was the coach at Howard, Andy played against Chuck Hinton, former major league player for several teams, including the Washington Senators, saw this happen once. And Chuck Hinton, the third base coach, looked at Matt and said, Matty boy, they just don't understand you. Meaning they don't understand that you're trying to get an edge, and everyone should be trying to get that edge. Did you see that at all, Andy? That happened to Matt?
Yes, I remember that now that you mention it. He was an ultimate competitor. He led that team in that he was on. He didn't take a leadership role when I was a senior, although we ended up, as a matter of fact, there was a fall league we played in. You mentioned Howard University. We played Howard, George Washington, American University, Georgetown University, and George Mason. And we played them all like 3 times or something and called that the fall league. And every year we did really well in that fall league, but we never won that as a quote unquote championship until my senior year that fall when Matt was on the team. We won that championship, and it was really cool. And so Matt was a champion as a freshman because being on that team. He started, I forget what percent of the games, but he did start maybe half of them or something. So that's pretty good as a freshman. And then, of course, in 1978, after I had left and really didn't think their team was going to be as good as any of the teams we had, turns out I was wrong. Their 1978 team went to the NCAA Division I Eastern Regionals. I guess that's what it was. And they started beating teams as a Cinderella. They beat St. John's a couple times. They were not supposed to get that far. They weren't even supposed to get into that tournament. And they got in, and then they almost won it, almost went to the College World Series. And Matt was the leader of that team.
He was. As Val Vandeventer, one of his teammates, said, if we had 9 Matt Kurkjians on our team, we would have won every game. That's how. And it was 1977, Andy. Sorry, not 1978. So the long story there is that Matt missed the bus headed to that tournament. Okay. Now, he wasn't asleep. He wasn't doing anything because nobody cared about being on time and being ready more than Matt. But somehow, miraculously, he missed the bus to the biggest tournament of his life. And Andy, Jeff, you can appreciate this. Our father, Jeff's grandfather, Pop, the greatest man ever, Matt called Pop, who was, 45 minutes away from Catholic University, living in Bethesda, and said, Pop, I missed the bus to the tournament. So our dad jumped in the car, drove 1,000 miles an hour, as he was known to do, picked up Matt and drove him to New Jersey. And they beat the bus to the the hotel. So Matt wasn't late. In fact, he was early because our father said, you are not going to be late to the biggest tournament of your life.
Yeah.
And then Pop gave Matt his watch and said, I never want you to take this off because this can never happen again. And Matt kept that watch on his wrist until the day he died. He wore the same watch for 50 years. That's what Matt did as a tribute to our father.
That's a great story.
Andy, take us back to, I've heard this, it's a bit of like a tall tale in the Kurkjian household. Back to your senior year, my Uncle Matt's freshman year. He's playing second, if I'm not mistaken, and you're catching, as you did. And there's a runner stealing, you threw it down to second. Do you recall what I'm talking about here?
I talked to Tim about this earlier, and
Andy forgets, of course. He doesn't remember. If I had Andy's career, I could tell you every hit that I got in 4 years of college. He doesn't remember anything. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm not surprised to hear this story, but I was known as a catcher who could throw out runners, and I was throwing a good pitch, I guess, to second base. I remember throwing one to Bob Hickey once with Sam Perlazzo on first, and he was the leading base stealer in the country at the time, and we nailed that guy at second base, and the ump called him safe. I mean, he was going to say safe no matter what.
Yeah, and Sam Perlazzo later became the manager of the Orioles. And believe it or not, Andy, I told him all about this famous caught stealing that wasn't. I swear to God, he remembered the whole thing. But the story goes, Jeff, is that, and this is the part Andy doesn't remember. Andy is a wildly competitive person, even though he doesn't appear to be on a daily basis. So he throws this strike to second, and Matt drops the ball. And after the inning, because Matt told me the story, Andy comes to him and says, Matt, if you're going to play on this level, you have to be able to make that play. Andy was pissed at his own brother. So Matt said, of course, because who's going to argue with your older brother who you finally get a chance to play with? But about 30 years after that, Andy, 30 years later, Matt whispered to me once and said, you know that famous ball that I dropped? Andy threw that ball slightly in the dirt. I had to pick that ball out of the dirt and make the tag. So everyone who thinks it was the most perfect throw and then I dropped it, it wasn't a perfect throw. I had to pick that. Yes, Matt told me that. It took him 30 years to tell me the entire story there.
Yeah, now I'm starting to believe this story. Okay.
So Jeff, back to the ECAC tournament. This is another Matt story. He has a million of them, but you got to pull them out of Matt because he's not going to sit there and brag about himself. But in the biggest game that he's ever played in, it's like I'll be wrong on the score, but it's like 6-5, 2 outs in the ninth inning. The bases are loaded, and Catholic U is up by 1 run. And 2 out, there's this incredibly high pop-up that's hit in the air, and it's hit to the third baseman, Matt Kurkjian. If he catches it, of course, the game is over. But with the bases loaded and 2 outs, if he somehow doesn't catch the ball, the game is over and Catholic U loses. And he told me that's as nervous as he's ever been in his entire career because the ball went up and he went, oh, my God, this is coming to me. This is hit higher than any pop-up I've ever seen. And he had time to recognize if I catch it, we win. If I drop it, we lose. And he caught it. So that was the biggest play he ever made. He made a lot of big plays, but nothing was bigger than that.
Yeah. Well, he always had his head in the game. And I remember our father would, as when we were like 10, 11, 12, or maybe even younger, he would, maybe we're in the car driving somewhere, and he goes, okay, it's second and third, 2 out, bottom of the ninth. We're up by 1 run. you're playing third base and the guy hits a ground ball right to you at third base, second and third, 2 out. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Think about it. Think about it. Know what you're going to do. That's the way Dad taught us. And so, obviously you throw to first, get the out, and the game's over. So,
Right.
Well,
some people would fire it at home and try to make a play at the plate, and the guy, something goes wrong and you lose the game. Anyway.
Dad, one of my favorite stories of having 3 boys in that household involves Nena in the outfield, your mom in the outfield with Pop.
Yeah, well, I'll tell the story. I'll try to make it quick. So my dad and mom came to like every game. I'm still not sure how my father, who was a PhD in mathematics and had like a real full-time job, seemed to go to every single game. I don't know how he did it and still kept his job. So my mom went to all these games too because she loved baseball, even though she was born in English. She didn't even understand it until a little bit later. So at the old Catholic University Stadium where Andy and Matt played, if you hit the ball, it was played on the football field also. So the right field stands were what, Andy? 275 feet from home plate. Is that accurate, roughly?
It was short.
It was short,
but it wasn't. It wasn't a home run. I mean,
right?
You get a double.
So Jeff, as you remember, you had to hit it over the stands for it to be a home run. If you hit it in the stands, since the ball is now out of play, it's a double. It's an automatic double. So Pop and Nena come to a game, and they're a little bit late for once, or Nena was at least late, and she is walking at the dividing line between the home run and the double. And her son, Andy, this big, strong left-handed hitter who hit a ton of homers at Catholic University, hits this long fly ball that ends up hitting his mother in the shoulder. And the ball ricochets, and she's standing right at the dividing line. The ball bounces into the doubles area. So now the umpires have to get together and say, well, what are we going to call this? It landed in the doubles area, but if it hadn't hit that woman out there, it would have been a home run, not knowing that the woman was the mother of the guy who hit the ball. So eventually they called it a home run. And Pop, after recognizing Pop, one of the funniest people ever, loved my mother more than anything. But after he realized that Nena was okay, even though she got hit in the shoulder, he went to her and he said, "What are you doing? You almost cost the kid a home run."
Yeah, that's a great story. Yeah, I remember that one.
Well, there's also the great story, Dad, of you guys played countless games in your home growing up in Bethesda, Maryland, including my favorite story about my grandfather, which is when you guys were playing ball in the house. Number 1 rule, don't play ball in the house. And while turning the double play, Pop, my grandfather, threw a ball or a pile of socks or whatever he was throwing through a door, the glass in a door, right, Dad? Do I have this right?
The French door window. He was showing his 3 boys how to make the double play. And he would throw a pillow down on the floor so we could see the proper footwork on how to make the double play. And he would throw the ball into the couch there, which is right next to, backing up against the French door window. So he airmails the couch because he throws it a little bit too hard. He breaks the window, and Mom had told us a million times, don't throw the ball in the house. Now Pop throws the ball and breaks a window, and then he looks at me, his youngest son, and says, "Tim, tell Mom that you did it, and I'll get you off easy." Poor Pop, he couldn't help himself, but he went to every one of Matt's games too. And Matt played a game, Andy, one summer up in Casca, where Andy played a bunch of games. And my dad brought his dog Bogey to the game. And my dad refused to keep Bogey on a leash back then because he wanted Bogey to run. So Matt is playing center field at Casca, and Bogey runs onto the field to greet Matt, who's playing in a game, and he's in center field, and the dog is on the field, and Bob has to run, get him, and put him on the leash. It was the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
See, this is the kind of household that the Kurkjian boys were raised in, and why they are the way they are. Now, obviously, Uncle Andy, we brought you in today to talk about your brother and to talk about the middle son, Andy, Matt, and Tim. And losing Uncle Matt in 2023 was obviously extremely heartbreaking. But not only was he a great baseball player, he was a great dad. He was the best uncle in the world. I had a chance to speak at an event here locally for an ALS group, and I talked about how my Uncle Matt taught me how to work with my hands, I would spend hours in his workshop. I would be making my Pinewood Derby car, like this one I have here, right? Like, my dad had no ability when it came to working with his hands, and now I build things for my house, and I'm very handy because of my Uncle Matt. Now, despite him being your middle brother, not your littlest brother, but your little brother nonetheless, what is something that, as you two began, to become adults and become dads, that you really looked up to Matt when it came to the man he became?
Oh, wow. Well, Matt, Matt, well, there's so many qualities about Matt that, besides his athleticism, he was, like you mentioned, he was a great father. He was extremely social. He was very extroverted. You would go to a party and he would talk nonstop until people were like, when is he going to stop talking? And you'd get him on the phone and he would go on and on and on. And you'd have to say, Matt, I'm going to have dinner now. I'm going to have to hang up. And he'd keep talking. Those are some funny qualities about him.
Jeff, I saw him have a 15-minute conversation with a guy at a party one night, and then he came over to me afterwards and said, who is that guy? He didn't even know who he was. That's who Matt was. But you're right, Andy. His sociable qualities were like nothing else, and he was the greatest dad.
He had a million friends.
Right.
We had his celebration of life.
Right.
It was a challenge because so many people he touched their lives, and it was I don't know, the Catholic University hosted it in their biggest venue, hundreds, and I'd say 350 people went. People spoke, stood in line to speak, and it went on for hours. And the tributes were just, not unexpected, but it just was very impressive.
Right.
In fact, I was it was funny because we wore these name tags. I don't know if you remember that. But the name tag had your name on it, and then underneath it, you wrote down how are you related, or how do you know Matt? And so, obviously I'm his brother, so I write down I'm his brother. But the more that night went on, the more I realized that, when I was the older brother and I'm like the catcher for Catholic University and most valuable player and all this, Matt would look at me and go, I'm Andy's brother. And then Tim became a big TV personality, and I would switch and I'd say, I'm Tim's brother. And then my wife became a big real estate agent in Texas, and I would say, well, I'm Terry's husband. But so these are how I became known. But at that that night, at the celebration of life, I realized I'm Matt's brother.
Right. And Andy, you were Matt's older brother because he looked up to you so tremendously all the time. And I remember putting on my nameplate that night, Tim Kurkjian, little brother, because I was Matt's little brother. And it wasn't just a physical distinction, which we all know how little I am. I was Matt's younger brother, and I was only 11 months younger, born in the same year. But Matt was always my big brother in every way. He protected me. We went to school the same year, played on all the school teams together, athletic teams together. So he was always my big brother. And the way that he helped me through, whether it was in math class in high school or the baseball team or anything that we were doing, especially when things needed to be fixed around the house. We always called Matt, because Matt would be over in a heartbeat to help us out. And Andy, I know you know this, but our senior year in high school, Matt won the MVP of the team, and he won the Spartan Award the same year. The Spartan Award was given to the player that was the best teammate on your team. Nobody has ever won the Spartan Award and the MVP in the same season, except for our brother Matt, which just kind of spoke to who he was as a great teammate. And Andy, you remember Bobby Keene? We played, and Matt, Bobby, and I played in high school together. And then Matt played slow pitch softball until he was like 55 years old. And Matt's the best player in the league. He's the shortstop on their team. And Bobby wasn't as good a player as Matt, obviously, but he told me after Matt died, he said, I played next to Matt in those slow pitch softball games for years, and he never, ever, ever made me feel inferior to him, even though he was 1,000 times better than I was. So in other words, if he made it's supposed to be a double play and I didn't make the turn properly, he would never look at me like, what are you doing? He would never treat anybody like that, because that's not what a great teammate does. And that's why Matt is the greatest teammate I know that I've ever had. Ross Natoli, the baseball coach at Catholic University, calls Matt the greatest teammate ever. And it's not just in a baseball sense. It's everything that he did at home, everything that he did with his children, Lane and Michael. I'll never forget this. When Lane and Michael they would go to Sunday school at a Catholic church. And Matt went in to help out with the teaching at a Catholic church on Sunday. And he was just being there to be with his children and to help out. And then they found out that Matt wasn't Catholic, and they kicked him out of the Sunday school. And he had to say, well, what does that have to do with it? They said, well, you're teaching Catholic children. He goes, well, I just want to help out. This was classic Matt. All he wanted to do was help people out, and they kicked him out because he wasn't Catholic. We got a big chuckle about that.
Well, after retiring from his long career, he went back to your guys' elementary school to be a teacher's aide, to be an aide. And Mr. Matt was just, he dealt with everything from, maybe students that needed a little more one-on-one attention, whether they had a physical or an intellectual disability. He worked with different teachers to help them out throughout the day. And Mr. Matt was known as that guy. And 10 years ago, our family suffered an unimaginable loss when we lost my cousin, Nina, unfortunately, very tragically. And I remember so specifically, obviously, family coming in from all over to the DC area for the services. And Uncle Matt was, I think there was two of them. Two of them.
Heroic.
He was at the airport.
Heroic.
He was putting people up in his house. Sure, we all do that. But he was planning out meals and drawing. Remember, he would draw out directions, and then he would copy them. He would write them out, and he would copy directions on how to get to the funeral service, how to get to this, how to get to that, to make sure everybody knew what they were doing. And I was only 21 at the time, so just really entering true adulthood, looking at him and saying, this man is a superhero. Truly incredible.
He was. And during all of that, we had to go to Georgetown University for a bunch of things, and Andy is taking Nina's parents and his brother Rob from place to place, and they were in a bit of a hurry, and Rob forgot his computer. So they had to go back and get the computer. We should not laugh about this, but Matt went and got the computer, and then they were in such a hurry, he drove on the wrong side of the road in order to cut down the distance to home. And like Nina, Gail and Nico and Robbie are like, they're mortified. What are we doing here? And Matt got them home to the next function by driving a short distance on the wrong side of the road, because that was Matt. I'll never forget. I had my car in the shop once, and I had to get it out by 5:00 on Friday. Otherwise, I would not have my car for the weekend, and that was unacceptable. Matt drove It was about a 30-minute ride. And he got there in about 17 minutes, driving on sidewalks and everything else. And we rescued my car. That was Matt, one of the great daredevil drivers ever. And also, Jeff, must be pointed out, he jumped over the hood of a car multiple times. Andy, did you ever see him do that?
I wanted to tell that story.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, my story is, I had been in college, I guess. And this is maybe the late 60s or 1970 when Cadillacs were these arcs. They were gigantic. They were really long and really wide. And the hood is like flat. And it's, they're pretty high up. They have big tires and everything like that. And so I can't remember exactly where we are, but I was there. And I'm like, Matt can jump over a Cadillac. And I'm like, nobody can jump over a Cadillac. It wasn't so much the horizontal distance, because if there's no car there, you could probably, jump that far, like a long jump. But I would say the height of the hood is just above your waist. And anyway, he ran, he jumped, he cleared the car, and I'm like, oh my God, that was unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And Jeff,
talk about his athleticism. It was amazing.
It was amazing. I saw him do it at 11 o'clock one night at the University of Maryland. We'd all had a little bit too much to eat that night, and we were out with all his Catholic U buddies who would goad him to do all sorts of crazy stuff. The point about what I saw him, the car was parked at a red light, and he jumped over it while it was parked at a red light. Can you imagine being the driver of this car, and then an adult male jumps over the car while you're at a red light? I saw Matt do that more than once. And I thought, oh my gosh, how can I'm the biggest chicken in the world. How can I be related to somebody who A, can jump over the hood of a car and has the courage to do it while it's at a stoplight? Unbelievable.
I might have been able to jump onto the hood. Maybe.
Right.
But I mean, honestly, it was unbelievable.
Right.
Unbelievable. Nobody could do that.
Right.
Nobody.
But that's Jeff. It's because he got challenged by his college buddies who had their own little club there. It was called Riff Raff, named after the bad guy in the Underdog cartoon series that Andy, Matt, and I grew up watching. I still have a Riff Raff shirt at home. And they used to torture poor Matt. They made him do all sorts of things because he said, I can do this. So they were about to punish him, and when I say punish, they would flick him in the head with their middle finger, and it would hurt like crazy. And he knew he was going to take it, but he said, I'm not going to. He said, and he had a dart in his hand, and he looked at the dartboard. There was a map on the wall. This is a true story. And he goes, you're not going to crush me if I hit the O in Bolivia with this dart. On a world map, I swear to God, he takes the dart, fires it at the map, and hits the O in Bolivia. I don't even think he knew where Bolivia was, and he still hit the O. That was Matt late at night at Catholic University.
Nobody could beat him in darts. It was unbelievable. He was amazingly good at that game.
Right. He was amazingly good at so many things, Jeff. But baseball was the number one thing that he was really good at. And again, that's why Catholic University honored him the way that he did. Not just, as we said, because he was a great player, but because of what a great teammate he was. And we're wearing these jerseys. I'm going to tell this story now. It's going to take a little while, and I may not get through it. But when Matt got sick, Ross Natoli, the baseball coach at Catholic U, said, I want you to throw out the first ball at the only fall date of the season, which was a doubleheader on October 1st at Mount St. Mary's. So Matt was having trouble gripping a baseball because the ALS had taken away his ability with his hands. So he and I played at catch out in front of his house. How many times did we do that as kids? And he relearned how to throw a baseball. So we went to Mount St. Mary's, and Matt is scheduled to throw out the first ball. And when he gets there, he is presented this jersey, the one that we are wearing, so he can walk out to the field and throw out the first ball. He throws out the first ball, a really athletic strike with a guy who has ALS. And he turns to his right, and I'm standing right next to him. He stands to his right, and his entire family is wearing these jerseys, the one that we're wearing right now. Then he looked further to his right, and all 48 players on the Catholic University baseball team were wearing Matt Kurkjian #2 jerseys. And that's the first time I saw him cry after this ordeal. He looked at me and said, "I can't believe they're doing this for me." Well, they did it for him because of what he meant to the Catholic University program, what he meant when he went back every year to support the Catholic University program. And that's why they named the Matt Kurkjian Ultimate Teammate Award after our brother.
I can't think of a better place to wrap, gentlemen. Uncle Andy, Dad, this was a joy to revisit these amazing memories and tell these great stories to keep Uncle Matt's memory alive. Pardon? Almost made it the whole time, Dad.
No chance,
Uncle
Jeff.
Andy.
No chance,
No
Jeff.
chance.
Matt was
No chance.
too important to our family, the ringleader of the entire family in every way, baseball, every single way. If someone was sick, Matt was there to go find him. If anyone needed help, Matt was the first guy in line, always.
Uncle Andy, thank you so much for sharing these great stories, these great memories on the podcast and with us. And I can't wait for Thanksgiving because we'll all be all the Kurkjians together with the ringleader now, your wife, Aunt Terry, planning every step of the way. And if she's in charge of a trip, I am very excited to attend.
Well, without Matt, we have to make an effort to fill his shoes. And if we don't do that, we'll miss all the kids getting together and stuff like that. So,
well, and to end on a lighter, happier note, when we did a New Year's weekend, this is when Uncle Matt was still with us and he was sick, and we wanted to do a wiffle ball game with the family. Now, Uncle Matt was not able to participate, but I believe it was Aunt Terry, your wife, who got him a jersey. It was a referee jersey, and a chair so he could be a part of the game. And he sat kind of behind and was the catcher and was able to be a part of that game. And that's a memory I will always have.
Right. And the memory I have of that game, and I will finish with this, is that Catherine Williams, Matt's partner at the time, made the defensive play of the game. She made the most miraculous catch I've ever seen, and she's never played wiffle ball, baseball, softball in her life. She made the defensive play of the game, and Uncle Andy, the decorated greatest player ever to play at Catholic University, he struck out in a wiffle ball game.
That's great.
So the best player struck out, and sorry, Catherine, the worst player made the defensive play of the game, and that was all as a tribute to Uncle Matt. And I'm sorry, that was the last time that Matt was in his glory, is that he knew everything that was going on. And I'll never forget, when we left, he just started crying. And when we went back to Maryland, because he said, I just don't want to leave these people. I don't. And 6 months later, he was gone. Sorry, Jeff.
I thought we were going to end on a lighter note.
No, well, we had enough laughs today. And
we did.
The reason is, Andy, is, Matt would be really upset with us right now if we didn't have a few chuckles, if we didn't mention jumping over cars and hitting the O in Bolivia and stealing home 5 times and getting a home run off of Justin. He would have been disappointed. So
I'll tell you a quick golf story if we have time.
Sure.
Yeah, please.
So Matt, Matt didn't like golf because you had to pay to play. And he said He's like, I'm not paying that kind of money to play golf. Well, he came to Florida. This is before he had ALS, and that's where I live, and I belong to a country club, and I like to play golf. So I wanted to play golf with my brother, Matt. Well, he didn't even have clubs, so you give him like a set of clubs that he's never hit with, and he probably didn't even warm up, anything like that. Well, our 18th hole is difficult. It's a dogleg right, it's a par 4, and it's very, very hard to get a par. And so normally I feel really good if I get a bogey, and I get double bogeys more than I get pars. So anyway, we're playing this hole, and Matt tees off and I tee off, and we both hit good drives. And then he hits his second shot. It must have been 180 yards out to an elevated green. He must have hit it 2 feet from the cup, tapped it in for birdie. And I'm like, how do you do that? I mean, it was, I'll never forget the birdie he got on 18.
Right.
I'll never forget.
I don't want to top you, Andy, but I have to tell my golf story with Matt, and then I'll be done, I promise. He goes to England to play with our cousins. He's playing with Paul and Jamie, and they've never played golf with Matt before, and they literally tee off at 4:00 in the morning because it's like the summer and the sun never goes down, but it's still kind of dark out. So you could barely see the green on the first hole, which is a par 3, which is just unusual to have a par 3. And it's a really long par 3. It's like 205 yards, and they've never played with Matt. And he goes, well, I never play. I'm no good, but all right, I'll play with you. He gets up on the first tee in the dark in England, and from 205 yards away, he hits it 1 foot from the hole. He almost made a hole in one, and his cousins are looking at him like, how could you do that? You never play. It's dark outside, and the first swing you take, you hit it 1 foot away on a 205-yard par 3. That's Uncle Matt rising to the occasion at the biggest times. Nobody was better than him at that.
He had a lot of talent.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
All right, in my 4th attempt to wrap this up, I'm going to wrap this up. Uncle Andy, thank you so much for joining. Is this a great game or what? Dad, as always, thank you for being my partner in crime, my co-host, my best friend. I really appreciate it, and glad we got to take this time for Uncle Matt. Thanks, Uncle Andy.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Andy. Kurkjian boys forever.
I'm so glad we could do that.
Right. And it came in Lou Gehrig week, of course. And Jeff, when Matt, Andy, and I were growing up, one of our favorite movies was the Lou Gehrig story, Pride of the Yankees. And Matt and I watched that movie hundreds of times. It was one of our favorite movies ever. We could remember lines from it and everything else. And I think about that all the time, that was one of our favorite movies. And then Matt Kurkjian died from ALS. I just still don't understand this. But let's be clear, Jeff. Matt Kurkjian was the pride of the Kurkjians. No doubt about that.
Thank you for listening. And as always, thank you for being a part of our family.